Greetings and lovely morning to everyone present here. I am Uma Shankar from Proteus, the Biology Club of IISER, and I shall be your host today. Proteus is delighted to welcome all of you to its final talk of the Rhetor 3.0 series. Rhetor started as a mini symposium which gets speakers worldwide, indulging our audience in various exciting developments in the scientific arena. We are excited to conduct Rhetor with full enthusiasm and at a larger scale this time. The theme of Rhetor 3.0 is etc., a timeline of biological manipulation. We will explore the concept of the hierarchy of the biological organization from molecular biology to astrobiology and leave it open-ended for the future of biology to decide upon the concept. The topic of our ninth and final talk will be researching habitable worlds and life in space. Our speaker for today is Miss Maj-Britt Karlman Asp, Master Students in Astronomy at Stockholm University. We cordially welcome you. Ms. Maj-Britt is a former mentor in mathematics and physics at NTI School in Stockholm, Sweden. She is currently a mentor in physics and project manager at KTH, Royal Institute of Technology, Stockholm. We are excited to have you here today, Ms. Maj-Britt. Before we begin the talk, I kindly request the audience to keep the microphones muted and videos switched off throughout the session. I request everyone to hold on to your questions until the end of the talk, and if any questions arise in between, you can use the chat box and I shall read them out during the interactive session. I would like to hand over the virtual mic to Ms. Maj-Britt now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I will start with sharing my presentation, and I hope it will work fine. So let's see. Share, and you can all see it now, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, great. So I was invited here to talk to you about astrobiology today. But first, I would like to introduce me a bit more about who I am, so you know why I was chosen to be here. My name is Maj-Britt, and I come from Boden, which is a small town in northern Sweden. You can see it here on the map, and you can see that it lies quite close to the Arctic Circle. And this means that we have much darkness about half time of the year, which means that we get many stars and northern lights. As you can see here in this image, this photo was taken by my mother in September this year, and it's northern lights and stars just outside of our house. So this is what I grew up with when I was a kid, and I used to love to look into the sky and wonder if we are alone or not, and that sparked my interest for astronomy as a science. So when I graduated from high school, I moved to Stockholm, and I started astronomy in their bachelor program and master program at Stockholm University. But since I was interested in astrobiology and in the questions if we are alone or not, I also took extra courses in geology and cell biology. And currently, as was mentioned, I'm a project manager at KTH Royal Institute of Technology, where I teach digital courses in physics and math. But my goal is to become a scientist within astrobiology. So currently, I'm also searching for a perfect PhD position. So what about astrobiology? Well, it is a multidisciplinary subject, which is partly astronomy or astrophysics. It's math, it is biology, it is chemistry, it is geology. So, and the question that we all want to answer is basically, are we alone in the universe, and where did we come from? How is life created? But to answer these questions, we can look at several topics, which I have listed here below. So, for example, we need to study the origin of life, which is where we came from, and the beginning of Earth as we know it, and the prebiotic Earth. Another thing to study is how life is, what life is made of, the building blocks of life. So, for example, here we have a building block called adenine, which is part of our DNA. We can also look at extremophiles, which is organisms that want to live in extreme environments. So where it's really hot or really cold, or a really high or low pressure. Because since space is an extreme environment, we can start by looking in our own extreme environments on Earth. So here we have a picture of a little water bear, also called tardigrades, and they have actually been known to survive in vacuum for a few days. And finally, we can look at life in space, and that includes both life that we send up in space, for example, astronauts, and we can do experiments with them, and we can also study the human bodies when it's exposed to a space environment and to zero gravitation. But we can also study life in form of experiments that are brought up together with astronauts or without astronauts in space, on spacecrafts. And finally, we can also search for life in space. And including searching for life in space, we also look at habitability in space. So like this picture, where can we expect to find life? Well, on Earth, we lie in the habitable zone, so we expect to find life in these zones. So these are some of the things that you can study as a topic within astrobiology. And since I'm interested in life and life in space, the last two topics are the ones that I have been focusing on as an astrophysicist. So, just gonna drink a bit. When we search for life, we first need to know what life is made of. So, therefore, we need a bit of background information about Earth and life. So, Earth is 4.6 billion years old, and we know that life started within the first billion years. So we know that life needs, as we know it, life needs at least 1 billion years to thrive. And we also know that all life on Earth consists of the same building blocks, which are 20 proteinogenic amino acids, and those are amino acids that form proteins, 5 nucleobases, and some carbohydrates, and some fatty acids, which you can see in this figure here is a example of these building blocks. And as you can see in the figure, all of these different building blocks require carbon, and this is why we call our own life carbon-based life. I also wanted to talk or mention a bit about amino acids because they are quite interesting when searching for life. So amino acids are called chiral, which means that they have a left or right-handed symmetry that we also call L or D stereoisomers. And life seems to generally be built by the L form, although we have some example of bacteria that prefers the D form and some enzymes that can convert the D form to L form. But in general, when we look at amino acids in life, they simply prefer the L form. And we don't know why this is, but this can be helpful when we analyze amino acids that are from space, because if we find an amino acid from space that have a D form, it is a higher chance that this amino acid actually formed in space, because if it formed on Earth, it would be a higher chance that it should be in an L shape or L form. So that is one way to see if an amino acid is from space or not. Okay, so we have the building blocks of life, but we still need to assemble them. And this is done in a solvent where the building blocks can mix and react. And on Earth, that solvent is liquid water. And this is why water is important for all life on Earth. And finally, we also need energy for life to thrive. And on Earth, most of the life relies on sunlight that will be converted to chemical energy. And this is the process of photosynthesis. Although some bacteria use chemical reactions to directly get their energy. And one of these chemical reactions is called methanogenesis, where the byproduct is energy and methane. So when we search for life in space, we need to search for these three things that life needs: the building blocks, liquid water, and some form of energy source. Or we can also search for bioproduct from chemical reactions. So what have we found so far? Well, one really good example is the Murchison meteorite, which you can see here. This meteorite was or landed in the town of Murchison in Australia in 1969. And using a method or several methods called GCMS, it stands for gas chromatography mass spectrometry, we have found several of these building blocks. So for example, we have found 5 amino acids, which I've written here in parentheses, and some nucleobases, alcohol, and also ribose. And ribose is, as you may know, the sugar that is needed in RNA. And the ribose was also found using isotope analysis, which showed that this ribose is actually from space because it contained more of the col-13 isotope than is normal for ribose that come from Earth. And besides this meteorite, we have also found an amino acid called glycine in the Wilt-2 comet. And this was collected by using a spacecraft called Stardust that NASA sent up and collected a sample from the comet through a flyby of the comet. And finally, there have also been some data simulations and lab experiments that will simulate or try to resemble the composition of the Saturnian moon Titan, where in these experiments they have found that several of the nucleobases could form and exist in that environment. We have also found a lot of liquid water in space. And liquid water can exist in 2 places in space as we know it today. And the most common one is in the habitable zone, which I mentioned earlier. And this is the distance from the star where liquid water can exist on the surface of a body. So here you see to the right, you see the habitable zone for Earth, where it's not too warm and not too cold, but just right for liquid water to exist. And we can use this simplified equation that I've written down to get an estimate of this distance. So we see that the habitable zone, or the distance to the habitable zone, depends on the luminosity of the star. So this means that, as you can see in the image here, that the brighter or hotter the star is, the further out the habitable zone will be. But we can also find liquid water in another place in space, at least in our own solar system. And that's actually far outside the habitable zone. For example, on Jupiter's moon Europa, which is an icy moon, we expect to find a subsurface ocean that can exist due to tidal forces from Jupiter that is exerted on Europa that will tidally heat Europa from within. And here you can see an artist's impression of it, how it would look. So we have Jupiter here, and here is another moon of Jupiter called Io. And here we have Europa with a thick ice crust that is several kilometers thick. And then below the ice crust, we have a liquid ocean. And we expect to find life here underneath in this subsurface ocean. So that is the other place where water can exist. And I just wanted to mention a bit about exoplanets, which are planets around other stars, are called extrasolar planets or exoplanets in short. And so far we have discovered over 5,000 exoplanets, and a lot of these are in the habitable zone. And we have also discovered so-called water worlds where the planet contains a lot of liquid water. So these are not just theories, but we have actually detected a lot of planets. Now I wanted to present a bit about my own research regarding astrobiology. And in the bachelor thesis, I did the following, examining stellar mass limits for the habitable zone. And the master thesis was life on moons, on the possible occurrence rates of habitable exomoons around stars of different masses. So let's start with the bachelor one. So we know that a star is exerting radiation upon its planet. Just like here on Earth, we experience radiation from our sun. And this radiation, the X-ray and ultraviolet radiation, that I will now call XUV radiation, that radiation can be harmful for the atmosphere. And if the planet will get enough of XUV radiation from the star, it will not be able to maintain the atmosphere any longer. And life as we know it need an atmosphere to survive. So I wanted to look into what the limit was for how much could a planet take in form of XUV radiation before the atmosphere will be destroyed. So I translated this XUV limit, radiation limit, to a stellar mass limit. And the result that I got was that planets in the habitable zone around a star that is less massive than 0.42 solar masses will not be able to maintain an atmosphere. And this means that even if we find a planet within the habitable zone around a small star that is less than this mass limit, we will not expect to find life on that planet, even though it is within the habitable zone, because the planet's exposed to too much radiation from the star. So if we want to look for life, we should look for life around stars that are more massive than this mass. And this symbol means solar masses that we use in astronomy. If we move on to life on icy moons, I need to give you a bit of background information for that one as well. So as you may know, in our solar system, we have giant planets. And these planets, like I said, have some moons with icy surfaces and subsurface liquid oceans. And they are able to maintain their liquid oceans due to tidal forces. And we also have, I think I mentioned it before, the frost line, which is the distance from the star where water becomes ice. So in our solar system, that frost line goes between Mars and Jupiter. And we also know that in our solar system, we have a lot of moons around the giant planets. So if we would like to find more of these kind of icy moons in other stellar systems, it would be a good estimate would be to search for other giant exoplanets, because that's where we expect to find icy moons around giant exoplanets that are outside their star's frost line. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to find giant exoplanets outside of their star's frost line. And I limited my research to 20 parsec, which is a distance within the solar neighborhood. So stars that are quite close to our home. And the result that I found was that we have the highest chance of finding giant exoplanets around stars that are about 1.5 solar masses. And I also found that we have a low chance of finding giant exoplanets around stars of more than 3 solar masses. So the conclusion here was if we want to search for icy exomoons, we should focus our search around 1.5 solar masses of stars. Finally, I would like to mention a bit about the research ongoing at Stockholm University and research in the world currently. So here we have a picture of Alba Nova, which is the Stockholm University building for astronomy and physics. There we have the Department of Astronomy, and we have several groups within that department, but the most interesting one for this talk is stars, planets, and astrobiology. And in that group, they focus on the astronomical and astrophysical part of astrobiology. And the department also work frequently with the European Space Agency and the European Southern Observatory. And here I have presented some of these works. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. And these works all of them are projects together with the European Space Agency, I should say. And we also, you can see that these are also very neatly named, and that is because they are acronyms. And within astronomy, we like to use acronyms for pretty much everything. So let's start with BEAST. It's an ongoing research project where scientists search for giant exoplanets around a certain kind of stars that are called B stars. So they are searching for the giant exoplanets that I just talked about. Next, we have Cheops, which is a space telescope that recently was launched in 2019. And it is supposed to characterize already known nearby exoplanets. And in this case, Cheops was partly developed by Stockholm University as well, and they are continuing to writing software code for the telescope as well as using it. Next, we have some projects that are planned and will hopefully see the light of the day sometime. First, we have Plato, which is a space mission that will detect and characterize Earth-like planets in the habitable zone. And 2026 will be the launch date, hopefully. And then we have STARE, which is a satellite project that will discover Earth-like planets in our solar neighborhood, so close to our sun. And finally, we have a project called LIFE, which is also a space telescope that will be able to detect and characterize Earth-sized exoplanets and their atmospheres, and including biosignatures, if there are any. But these projects, STARE and LIFE, lies 10 to 15 years into the future. And researching in the world is also, of course, ongoing. Here we have a picture of the Extremely Large Telescope, ELT, which is an ongoing project that will be a ground telescope. I think the largest optical ground telescope in the world, and it will be able to directly image close Earth-like planets in and hopefully it will be in place by 2027. And finally, we have HABEX and LUVOIR, which are two NASA missions, and both of them are space telescope concepts that will search for habitable exoplanets and characterize exoplanets. Although these two examples will probably be set in the 2030s. And so all of these projects that I've been talking about now, the main point of them is that they will be able to detect and characterize potential habitable exoplanets where we might expect to find life. So that concludes my talk, and thank you so much for having me and for listening. I will stop my share now, and yeah, if you have any questions, you can tell me now.
Thank you so much, Miss, for the talk. It was insightful and amusing talk. Yeah, audience, if you guys have any questions, please raise your hands and turn on your mic, please. I think there's one question in the chat. So, what
Okay.
is the possibility of humans meeting aliens in the future, provided the large distance separation and rareness in complex life in the cosmos?
Let's see here.
I'll
I
put it up in the chat. Okay, 1 minute.
could you say the question again? I think I have another question here.
What is the possibility of humans meeting aliens in the future, provided the large distance separation and rareness of complex life in cosmos?
Um, I would say it depends on first how long our humanity will last. Because right now, as it is, we stand in front of a climate crisis, and we don't know how long humanity will last. But say that we overcome this crisis and that humanity will last a long time, and that we may be able to settle on some other planets or maybe on Mars. Um, I think it will be possible that we will discover life, but I'm not so sure that it will be possible for us to communicate with life, and like the question was to meet with aliens, because of the, like it said in the question, because of the vast distances in space. But when we search for life as it is right now, and what I think we expect to find is life in form of bacteria, like very small organisms and microbes. So that is the life that we expect to find. We don't expect to find like intelligent life anytime soon, because also we're searching in very close to us, to Earth. So if there was an intelligent life like our own in our solar neighborhood, say 100 light years away from us, in a radius, then we would probably already have found it. I hope that answers the question.
Yes. Arya, do you have a question?
No, it was a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
Is there a possibility that besides carbon-based organisms like DNA, RNA, acidic materials, other molecular assemblies act as acidic materials in other organisms? life live in other planets based on the environment, the organisms adapt in that way.
So I saw your question as well in the chat. Very good that you wrote it as well. That's a really good question. If we can find some other form of life that is not carbon based, we have found. I think there are some exceptions in life on Earth that is microorganisms that can change their carbon to another type of like subject. So, for example, I think there is an organism that uses phosphor instead of carbon. So I think it will be possible that we could find an organism that uses something else than carbon as genetic material. However, when we search for, I think that we should expand the search for like other life forms than just carbon. However, it is difficult because the only life that we know is in this form with these building blocks that I mentioned. So when we search for life, we have to start by looking at our own life, because that's the only life that we know how it looks. So it might be difficult to find life that doesn't have the same building blocks that we do, because we are a bit biased towards looking at that. But it is certainly a possibility that there will be it might exist life that has some other building blocks than our life and is not carbon based. So I think that we should look for that as well. Yes. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have another question in chat.
Yeah, I can read it out. Since astrobiology is very interdisciplinary field, and since we're mostly biology majors, what are some prerequisite field that you think we should really know if getting into this field? That's also a really good question. So since I mentioned I come from the astrophysical part, and if you want to know more about astrobiology and work with biology in space, I think that you should take some astronomy courses, at least on a bachelor level. It could be like an introduction to astronomy, so you know how the physics work in space. And besides, not only that, but I also think that it's good, and it's crossing towards biology, is to have some geology courses as well. So geology is the learning about rocks, and also about it mixes a bit the learning about rocks and also the learning about Earth, and how Earth was made, and dinosaur fossils, that sort of thing. And that's also really good to know if you want to learn more about astrobiology. So I would recommend courses in geology and astronomy, and then you can focus on, if you are more focused on the biological part, then you can find work within that field as well, as long as you have a bit of background information from these other topics. Chemistry is also really good. If you like chemistry, you can take courses in that. So there is a lot of opportunities depending on what you enjoy learning about.
Dr. Natesh has a question. Please, unmute.
Hi, I just wanted to ask about acidophiles. You might be aware of acidophiles which survive at extreme acidic conditions.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they also use water as the source of solvent. But in what way do you think that the proteins level that uses carbon as the energy source differ in them compared to a normal microorganism? This might something be important because space has a lot of extreme conditions. So in that context, if these clues can give some idea about what we have to look for in the space, that's the idea.
That's also a good question. I am familiar with acidophiles and that they enjoy their sour extreme environments or acidic environments. However, I'm not super familiar with what differentiates them on a bigger scale from other carbon-based life. But since since we're looking at the extremes in space, I think that we are and we should be looking for very generous conditions for life. So when we look for life, we are not excluding, for example, very acidic environments. So we do take that into our calculations, at least when we have our optimistic calculations. You usually separate like the optimistic boundary, for example, in habitability, and the pessimistic or conservatory boundary in habitability. But I'm afraid I can't answer the question any more particularly than that, because I would like to know more of myself about the biology as well, but I haven't gotten that far in my biology education yet. Um, but yeah, we do take it into consideration. It's a good question. Definitely.
Thank you very much for a very wonderful and exciting talk. I mean, the students will really appreciate it,
Thank you so
and
much.
as do myself as well. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you
for the
so
answer
much.
as well. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I think I had one more question in the chat. Yes.
Yes.
Is terraforming really possible? Um, well, both yes and no, I guess. I think the most likely scenario that we will experience, at least in our generation or maybe the next, we are right now about to send more people to the moon for the first time since in a long time ago, and in after we have been sending people to the moon, we have, or I say we, but I mean like internationally, NASA has plans on sending people to Mars for the first time, and this is the first step, I would guess, in terraforming. So I think it will be. Right now we have like these science fiction movies, for example. What's it called? The one with Matt Damon, who is terraforming Mars. I think that is not. It's not too far away. I think it could be possible, but it depends a lot on. I don't think it depends so much on research and technology as it does on actually monetary foundings, because it costs a lot of money to go to space, and the technology is very expensive. So I think terraforming is possible, at least in our solar system, like terraforming the moon and Mars. But terraforming other like extrasolar planets, that's a completely other question. That's further ahead and might be possible in theory, but then we still have to consider the great distances, and we know that our closest star lies 4 light years away, which means that it takes 4 years of going in light speed, and we are not able to go in light speed, so to get there. So that it's a good question, but I think I think it's possible to terraform the moon and Mars, and I think we will in some way do that. But I cannot. I don't know about terraforming exoplanets. That is very far ahead. But maybe within the if humanity continues to exist for say another 100,000 years, maybe it's on that time scale. Thank you so much.
Do we have any other questions? I think that concludes our interactive session. I thank you again, Ms. MajBritt, for the talk. And I do apologize for the time confusion that we caused.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, it's not easy with so much different times. It's
Thank you again for
it's
getting
really
back to us
early
too
here in the
quickly.
morning, but yeah. Thank you super much for having me. This has been a great opportunity for me as a aspiring scientist to be able to present a bit about my talk, and I hope that we will sometime meet again. It was very nice. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I
Thank
would also
you.
like to thank everyone who attended this talk and got actively involved in the interactive session. So this concludes our whole Rhetor 3.0 series as a whole. So with today's fantastic talk and all the other fascinating thoughts we had throughout this month, we've reached the end of the symposium, Rhetor 3.0. Proteus would like to extend our gratitude to all the speakers who accepted our invitation. We were also obliged to all the facility, faculty, staff, and students who enthusiastically helped us organize and make this year's Rhetor a whole success. And finally, without you, our audience, our Rhetor would have never achieved its goal of sharing the science experience. Thank you all for learning science together with us.